Welcome, YouTubers. This is a breakdown of an example that I see looking through news articles and stuff like that, where they say, hey, the debt is out of control, and we're spending like crazy, and we're spending our future, and we're if we were a family, this was what the numbers would look like, and all that kind of stuff. But they tend to leave some of that examples out. So let me go to the next slide. And here's an example of, whether it's in video print or newsprint. This happens to be from a Forbes article about GDP, and they shouldn't be using GDP against debt. They should be using tax revenue against debt, which is a little smarter. I agree with that. But at the end of the day, they're saying, hey, I underline it there, if the U.S. were a family, it would be deep into the financial danger zone. So as I go through this, distressed family example, and the future generations, how they're in peril, and how we're dying as the U.S. I'm not an economist. But the economists put this type of stuff up. I think they go to an economist seminar and they all come out with the same mantra. And I don't know which political party. I don't really care, but I'm just going to go through it and say, as we go through this exercise, I think there's three questions that I always kind of want to bring it back to. I am coming to a point here where it's like I don't think we're as in dire, but question one is always, would you trade your family with this family, and this family being the government example family. Two, would you lend this family money, or would a bank, or do you think they're credit worthy? And three, is this family in imminent peril of bankruptcy, or imminent peril in general, or deep into the financial danger zone, right? So as I do this discussions, there's a couple, points I'm going to specifically leave out. One of them is, that the Federal Reserve of the U.S. can print U.S. dollars, whereas your average family can't. The monetary system, so they won't ever really go into sovereign debt, where like a Greece would, where you can't, you don't make your payments, you just print more money. And I know that does inflation and stuff like that, and that has bad implications, but we're not gonna, this family's not gonna go bankrupt because you can print dollars. And secondly, there's a really fascinating sort of wacko theory that we are already in bankruptcy. We've been in bankruptcy since 1930, and the 1913 16th Amendment put that Federal Reserve Act in, and we became debtors to the international banking cartel, or international money funds, with the Rockefellers and Rothschilds. Maybe I'll do another video sometime on this, because it's quite fascinating, but it's pretty far out there. But it actually is, as you more deeply research in 1933, there's definitely those changeover where we actually went to a corporation and we do pay that debt, and that's why we have to pay income taxes. And many countries went debt at that particular point in time after the big worldwide crash. And so it's, controlled by the international banking cartel, and if you don't make those payments, those things would have happened badly for you. And so most of the countries took a sort of a secret bankruptcy. So let me get off that and go back to where we were. I probably will do another thing on debt itself, so switch the slide. And we're somewhere around 19.3 trillion in debt, and that fluctuates by the second. People have tickers, people do stuff like that. And we've been accumulating that throughout our lifetime from 1790, where we inherited a huge debt from the wars and the foreign countries that financed that War of Independence. And from 1790 on, now there was a point around 1830s that we actually had paid, our first 40, 50 years in existence, we tried to pay our debt down, and we actually paid our debt to zero for like a month or a year or whatever it was. I think it was like a month. But, that almost killed us economically. So, we've been a debtor nation after that, and we funded mostly wars, jump out big spikes in debt. But clearly that 1913 and 1933 is where we turned the corner, and we've been in a debtor. It's actually necessary to have debt. But anyways, we're 19 point, the point is, I think of the economists, is that we're exploding our debt so exponentially. But that was always going to happen. So it's 19 with 12 zeros after it is a trillion. And that's, the point of bringing it down back to a household or per capita is that so people can relate to it, because I can't relate to what $19 trillion in $20 bills would be. Does it? I just got $1,000 of $20 bills and it fills up my pocket pretty well. So I don't know how. I don't know what you would need to, swimming pool. I don't know. What would $19 trillion in $20 bills look like? Probably isn't even $19 trillion in $20 bills in circulation even. But anyways, the number that I'm going to use, and this again, another number that changes all the time, but it's $59,885 per person, which equates to 317 million roughly people, which makes sense. That's about where America is. Or it's $154,344 per household is what the debt relates to. So that's 123 million households. You give or take a million households, or give and take $1 trillion. It doesn't really matter at this point in time. So 154, I've seen higher numbers than $154,000 being in debt per household, but that's the number I'm going to go with. And so the questions again were, would you trade with this family? Does your family have $154,000 in debt? Would you lend money to this family? And is this family in imminent peril? And we don't really just know just based upon a debt number. So the next thing that people try to give you, well, let me first of all draw in our little family here. There's our backyard. I'll draw a modest 2-2 house, 2-bedroom, 2-bath. I'll skip the number of garages because that's going to be my example in the future, or what car is in the garage or whatever. But we're a 2-2 house, modest little average house or whatever, median house. Again, these are all average numbers. So it turns out against that $19.3 trillion in debt, we earn about $6.7 trillion in revenue. This family called the federal government. And just to break that down real quickly, it's roughly 47% of that comes from the personal income tax that we pay and the government collects. Another 33% comes in the payroll tax, which employees pay half of that and employers pay half of that. Unless you're self-employed, then you pay the whole thing. And I think that's 6% and 12% of your paycheck. So they get money from that. They get money from corporations, not a whole lot, 10%, but it's 10% of it. And keep in mind, corporations hire people who pay payroll and income tax, so they actually pay quite a bit too. And the other 10% is like excise taxes, estate taxes, random sales taxes, and stuff like that. So that's about what it makes up. So you do contribute. As long as you're employed or own a corporation or pay some of the sales taxes that are applicable to that thing, then on average that breaks down to $23,443 per person, or $57,972 is paid in taxes per household, and that's on average. So obviously, and it includes corporations. So you probably don't pay $58,000 in taxes for your household. And we can make some arguments about whether you pay, even close to that, and, partially whether you should even be voting if you don't at least pay your share. You're not paying your share if you're not paying $58,000, right? And most of us aren't. So rich people pay it, and big corporations pay it. But anyways, that's where we're at. And so I think if we break that down, here we got $154,000 in debt, and we got $58,000 in income. This household that we're talking about. And so now you can ask those questions again. Would you trade places with this family? Some of us would, some of us wouldn't. It's quite a bit of debt, and some of us make more than that as a household, but some of us make less. I'm sure in America that's not the median number. Probably more people make less than that is. So some people would trade right now. Would you lend this family money? Well, they got a 2.5, a little over 2.5 debt to income ratio. Not a great credit rating, but maybe not. And is the family in imminent peril or bankruptcy? Well, they're whatever, kind of in the middle. Not quite sure. Really what you need to figure out is, what is the $154,000 in debt? And what kind of debt is it? Because obviously in the economist example, they want you to think that it's willy-nilly credit card spending or something, or you spent it on something and you're just in debt. And so, is it like a credit card? And I put 28% out there. I know you can get probably 12% credit cards, 21% credit cards, but they want you to think that it's like $150,000, $54,000 in debt. And even then, I'd have to ask, even if it was credit card debt, you'd say, hey, did you buy a pool with it? Did you remodel your kitchen? Did you spend the money taking a vacation? Something that you have a memory, but you don't have any positive worth anymore. So is it just flushed down 154,000, or is it in it? Or is it more like, is the 154,000 in debt like the house that we own? Is it like a mortgage, right? A 4% APR interest rate, and that's a different kind of debt. Some people probably loan money. Be like, hey, I just have a mortgage, right? Well, is it secured debt or not secured debt? Of course, in the real government example, we pay for stuff like fixing a road and feeding people who don't work, and we pay for other stuff that we're it's kind of neither the frivolous vacation. I mean, there is positive social outcome to it, but nor is it like actually a mortgage, right, where you have some positive collateral in all cases. Some of it is just spent, right? So it's kind of a mix, and of course that debt goes back to the 1830s and certainly to the 1790s. So who knows? It could be old wooden teeth or something that are on this debt that hasn't been paid off. But most like a lot of it's roads and stuff like that, or infrastructure that is necessary, and we try to push the economy along so that we all have jobs and move on. So what kind of debt is it, right? Well, I said, okay, well, let me figure out what kind of interest we pay on that debt every year, and every year we pay on that debt $223 billion currently in interest, and that's a lot of money, right? All right, you're paying, look at all this interest. Look, what can you do with $223 billion? But in reality, if you break it down against the debt or per household, it's $1,800 per household, which is no cheap fee, but it's only a 1.1%. So $223 billion on the $19 trillion is only a 1.1% APR loan. So that's the money that we're borrowing, and that's actually neither credit card nor mortgage. As a matter of fact, it's much better. It's cheap debt. If we could all get 1.1% loans for our house, if we paid the same house payment, we'd be paying off our house in 19 years instead of 30. Or we'd all buy bigger houses, right? If that was 1.1, and we'd be buying cars, and we'd be buying all kinds of stuff. We'd be financially irresponsible too. So when it's $154,000, but that's got a 1.1 APR attached to it, that's much more better with the $58,000 income. And so, yeah, would you trade places with this family? Well, the number of people knowing that would jump over the fence and trade places with this family. Would you lend this family? Probably. Family money? Sure, probably would. And is this family in imminent peril or bankruptcy? Nah, 1.1, you can pay it off a little quicker. They still have pretty good debt to income ratio, but it doesn't matter when you're down at 1.1. That's for like debt to income is for like getting a personal loan or credit card or even a mortgage, right? This is much cheaper money. So don't know quite yet, but let me go over the differences, because there are some major differences other than the ones I started with, that we can print money and we're actually technically in bankruptcy already. But we have cheap debt, and I just went through that. Another difference is that $58,000 is tax-free revenue. The government doesn't pay taxes on the taxes they collect. That would be pretty stupid, right? Obviously. So there's no payroll taxes. There's no personal income taxes on that $58,000 that the family would normally. So that's where you alter your mind again. So that $58,000 could grow by 25% as real income, since you're not paying taxes in that. Your effective income could be higher. So just call it $15,000 add on there, and make it $73,000. So now you got $73,000 of real money, and you got $154,000 of debt, more like a 2-to-1 ratio. So yeah, now a lot more people would trade with this family. Maybe a lot of families are in better shape than that, but a lot of people would trade with this family, probably lend money to this family, and it's not even less peril than what I had. Certainly, maybe not bankruptcy, but but I do have one more, and we haven't discussed because this example that they mostly have almost never discussed the assets. I mean, you have these liabilities of debt, and you have some assets and income, but keeping in mind if America is going to act as a family, and we're going to break it down, they're going to have assets because America has assets. So it's not like they're destitute. So for this example, I chose to monetize those assets in some regard. And so let's look at the family assets, and I broke down an example. This is where that garage comes in. So if you want to hold out the example, if the government was a family, everything we just said was true. Everybody's $154,000 in debt. Everybody's got $58,000 tax-free income. But we also have $2.5 million per household in assets. And I drew that in as 10 Ferraris, $250,000 Ferraris, I guess. So that's what you have parked out in the yard. I guess you'll need a 10-car garage to house those things, right? But $2.5 million is your assets. And so now, would you trade with this family? Well, that number just went up significantly. I just went into that category that I would trade with this family. Would you lend this family money? Probably, especially if it was secured against, I don't know, 1 or 2 Ferraris. And is this family in imminent peril or bankruptcy? Probably not, right? I mean, there's lots of ways they could deal with this $154,000. And even if you continue to go in debt, at a rate of extra 10 or 20,000 a year, and it all of a sudden became 220, I guess you'd have to part with a Ferrari. You could sell a Ferrari. I mean, there's lots of solutions to this. You'd be leaving your kids 9 Ferraris, right, and to be debt free, right? So, don't buy the hype that the U.S. government is running out of assets or anything. So, I think that's, did you change your mind during this? There's the real example. And I hope you enjoyed this little lecture. Maybe I'll put together some other lectures, like I said. Have a good one.